he a skeptical millionaire obsessed with perfection. She, a young, unassuming assistant, hides her passion for dance. One day, he sees her dancing alone, with a passion and grace that shock him. The CEO falls in love watching her dance. Before we begin the story, leave a comment and tell us what city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The New York rain hammered against the windows of the 23rd floor, creating a melancholic rhythm that echoed through the corridors of Sterling Tech. Emily Carter adjusted her simple framed glasses and organized the documents on her desk for the third time, checking that each sheet was perfectly aligned. At 26, she had perfected the art of being invisible. Her discreet attire, a beige blouse and knee-length black skirt, was carefully chosen to avoid drawing attention, as were her brown hair, always tied in a low, discreet bun. "Emily, I need you to organize the reports from today's meeting," said Karen, her supervisor, dropping a stack of papers on her desk without even looking at her. It was always like this. Emily was efficient, punctual, and competent, but seemed to possess the gift of becoming part of the furniture. As she typed silently, her fingers danced over the keyboard with a grace that no one noticed. In fact, almost everything Emily did had a rhythm, a natural fluidity that she hid from the world. During her lunch break, when the office emptied, she sometimes allowed herself small movements, swaying her shoulders to the sound of music only she could hear. But always careful not to be seen, Emily's life was divided between two worlds. The day where she disappeared between cubicles and reports, and the night where her soul came alive. After work, she took the subway downtown to a community center in Greenwich Village, where 3 times a week she attended contemporary dance classes. There, in that small studio with foggy mirrors and peeling bars, she transformed. Her movements told stories that her words could never express, releasing the passion she kept carefully guarded during the day. But even there, Emily stayed in the second row, avoided the front, convinced that her talent was just a silly dream of a simple girl who should be content with her modest life. She danced for herself, for that part of her soul that pulsed with the music, but would never dare imagine that anyone could see her as something special. Just 4 floors above, in an office that looked more like a fortress of glass and steel, Jonathan Sterling analyzed the third quarter numbers. At 40, he had built an empire that started in a garage in Palo Alto and now stretched across 3 continents. His company developed software that revolutionized the digital security market, and his name was revered in both New York and Silicon Valley. Jonathan adjusted the cuff of his Italian shirt and checked the Rolex on his wrist. Every detail of his life was meticulously planned, from the bespoke suits to the business meetings scheduled with military precision. He had learned early on that control was everything. Control over emotions, over the people around him, over every variable that could affect his results. Love had been just another variable that he had decided to eliminate from the equation. 3 failed relationships with women who were more interested in his bank account than in who he really was had been enough to convince him that vulnerability was a luxury that men like him could not afford. At 40, Jonathan had resigned himself to an existence of professional success and emotional emptiness. "Mr. Sterling, the Japanese investors have arrived," announced David, his personal assistant, interrupting his thoughts. "Perfect. Main conference room in 5 minutes." Jonathan stood up, adjusted his navy blue silk tie, and walked through the corridors with the posture of someone who commanded a kingdom. Employees lowered their heads in respectful greeting, whispering among themselves about projects and goals. He knew the productivity numbers of each department, the names of the managers and directors, but the faces of the ordinary employees blurred into a haze of productivity and efficiency. It was almost 7 p.m. when the meeting with the Japanese finally ended. A $15 million contract had been closed, another triumph to add to his collection. Jonathan loosened his tie and decided to make one last round of the floors before leaving. He liked to observe the empty office, that silence that preceded another day of achievements. It was when he went down to the 19th floor that he heard it. Soft music leaked from one of the corporate training rooms, the one normally used for presentations and workshops. Jonathan frowned. Who would be there at this hour? He approached the half-open door silently, and what he saw left him completely still. A woman was dancing alone in the center of the empty room. Her movements were fluid as water, expressive as poetry in motion. She had taken off her shoes and danced barefoot, her loose hair waving with each spin, the simple blouse now seeming like a second skin that followed each graceful movement. Jonathan recognized the face. It was Emily, the administrative assistant he had seen a few times in the corridors, always discreet, always invisible. But the woman dancing before him was anything but invisible. She was pure magic in motion, telling a story of passion and dreams with every gesture. For a moment that seemed eternal, Jonathan forgot to breathe. There was no pretense in her movements, no calculated performance. It was simply a soul expressing itself in the purest possible way. The music stopped, but she continued for a few seconds, completing the choreography with her eyes closed, a gentle smile illuminating her face. When she finally opened her eyes and turned towards the door, she met the shocked gaze of Jonathan Sterling. Time stopped. The whole world stopped. Blood rushed to Emily's face like a scarlet wave. For an instant that seemed like an eternity, she remained motionless, her wide eyes meeting the piercing gaze of Jonathan Sterling. The most powerful man in the company was there, at the door, watching her in her most intimate and vulnerable moment. I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling, she stammered, rushing to grab her shoes and bag. Her hands trembled as she tried to compose herself, running her fingers through her hair in a desperate attempt to tie it back up. I didn't know anyone was here. I'll leave immediately. Jonathan took a step into the room, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. You don't need to apologize. I didn't know you danced. It's nothing professional, she murmured, avoiding his gaze as she slipped on her shoes quickly. It was careless of me to use the company space. It won't happen again. Emily! The way he said her name made her stop, surprised. He knew her name. It was extraordinary. She raised her eyes, searching for any sign of sarcasm or mockery, but found only an intensity that made her feel even more exposed. There was something in his gaze that she couldn't decipher, a kind of hunger, as if he had seen something he had long been searching for without knowing it. Thank you, sir, she murmured, heading quickly for the door. Good night. Jonathan stood in the center of the empty room for long minutes after she left, still hearing the echo of her footsteps down the hall. The image of Emily dancing was etched in his mind like fire, each movement filled with a genuine passion that he had forgotten existed. For the first time in years, something had penetrated his carefully constructed armor. In the days that followed, Jonathan found himself looking for her in the corridors. He observed her discreetly during meetings, noticing details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way she lightly bit her lip when concentrated, how her fingers drummed silently on the table, following a rhythm only she could hear, the natural grace with which she moved even in her discreet clothes. Emily, in turn, felt the weight of his gaze like a physical presence. Every time she saw him approaching her floor, her heart raced. She began to take alternative routes through the corridors, ate lunch at different times, did anything to avoid meeting him. The shame of what had happened consumed her, but there was something more disturbing, the way he had looked at her, as if she were something precious, something worth seeing. During a department meeting, Jonathan unexpectedly appeared to discuss the quarter's goals. Emily kept her eyes fixed on her notes, but could feel his gaze on her. When the meeting ended and everyone got up to leave, he called her. Ms. Carter, could you stay for a moment? The office emptied quickly, leaving them alone. Karen, her supervisor, cast a curious glance before closing the door behind her. Emily remained standing beside her chair, her hands clasped in front of her. Please sit down, Jonathan said, his voice gentle but authoritative. She obeyed but maintained a rigid posture, her eyes fixed on her hands in her lap. How long have you been dancing? He asked, surprising her with the direct question. Since I was a child, she replied softly. But it's not anything serious. It's just a hobby. A hobby, he repeated the word as if it tasted bitter. What I saw in that room was not a hobby, Emily. It was art. She finally raised her eyes, meeting his. There was a sincerity there that disconcerted her. You don't understand. I'm just an employee. People like me don't... People like you what? Jonathan leaned forward, his voice low but intense. Don't deserve to dream. Don't deserve to be seen. The silence between them vibrated with an electric tension. Emily felt as if he was seeing through all her defenses, reaching parts of herself that she kept carefully hidden. It was terrifying and at the same time exhilarating. I need to get back to work, she said finally, standing up quickly. Of course. Jonathan also stood up, but didn't move away when she passed him towards the door. For a moment, they were very close, and she could smell the aroma of his expensive cologne, the magnetic presence that made him so powerful. Emily, she stopped, her hand on the doorknob without turning around. The company is organizing a social responsibility event, a project to support community arts. His voice was carefully controlled, professional. I'm looking for someone to coordinate the artistic part, someone who really understands dance. Emily turned slowly, her eyes wide. Mr. Sterling, I can't think about it. He went to the window, giving her room to breathe. It would be a temporary promotion with a corresponding salary increase, and you would have total creative autonomy. Why me? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. Jonathan looked at her over his shoulder, and in that look she saw something that made her tremble. Because you have something that cannot be taught or bought. You have soul. Emily left the room with trembling legs, the proposal echoing in her mind. It was impossible. It was madness. It was an opportunity that could change her life completely. But it was also dangerous in a way that she couldn't yet name. That night, in her small apartment downtown, she looked at herself in the foggy mirror of the bathroom. For the first time in years, she tried to see herself through someone else's eyes, through his eyes. And for a frightening and wonderful moment, she almost managed to see the woman he had seen dancing. The next morning, a folder with the detailed project proposal was on her desk, along with a handwritten note on letterhead. The answer doesn't need to be now, but when you decide, know that I believe in you. J.S. Emily held the paper with trembling hands, feeling like she was on the edge of a cliff. Jumping would mean leaving behind the safety of her invisibility, but it could also mean flying. Emily spent 3 days avoiding the folder on her desk, as if it were a bomb ready to explode her carefully organized life. During the nights, she danced with an almost desperate intensity, trying to find in the pirouettes and leaps the courage that she lacked during the day. On the 4th morning, Karen appeared in her cubicle with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Congratulations, Emily. I heard Mr. Sterling offered you the coordination of the social project. Her voice carried a poorly disguised acidity. It must have been interesting. The way you managed to get his attention. Emily's blood boiled. She had never defended herself from the malicious insinuations of her colleagues, always preferring invisibility to confrontation. But something had changed in her since that night in the training room. Maybe it was the way Jonathan had looked at her, as if she were worth something. I accept the proposal, she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. 2 hours later, Emily found herself on the 27th floor in a meeting room with a panoramic view of Manhattan. Jonathan was standing by the window, watching the chaotic movement of the city below. As she entered, he turned, and she noticed something different in his expression, a subtle relief, as if he hadn't been sure she would come. You accepted, he said, and it wasn't a question. Yes. Emily placed the folder on the mahogany table, her hands trembling slightly. But I need you to understand something, Mr. Sterling. I don't know why you chose me, but I'm going to give this project my best. Even if you're not what? He approached, stopping at a respectful distance, but his presence was still magnetic. Even if I'm not like the other women in your world, she finished, meeting his eyes. Jonathan was silent for a long moment, studying her face. Emily, do you have any idea how many women in my world I know who are empty inside? who wear masks so perfect that not even they know who they really are anymore. There was a bitterness in his voice that she had never heard before. For the first time, he didn't seem like the ruthless CEO, but just a man tired of something she couldn't fully comprehend. They spent the next few weeks working together, and Emily discovered layers of Jonathan that the media never showed. He was demanding, yes, but also incredibly attentive to the details that really mattered. When she suggested including children from underserved communities in the project, he not only approved, but personally ensured that transportation and meals were provided. "How did you learn so much about business?" she asked one afternoon after he had completely restructured the budget to maximize social impact. "Necessity," he replied simply, but there were shadows in his eyes. "When you grow up knowing that every wrong decision could mean losing everything, you learn fast." It was the first time he had mentioned anything about his past, and Emily felt that there was a story there. Layers of pain, carefully hidden under the veneer of success. During their meeting, she began to notice small things. How he never mentioned family beyond business engagements. How his office, despite being luxurious, didn't have a single personal photo. How he worked late every night, as if he were running from something. "What about you?" he asked one day, while they were reviewing the profiles of the dance studios that would participate in the project. "How does a woman with so much talent end up hidden in a cubicle?" Emily hesitated, her fingers playing nervously with the pen. It was a story she had never told anyone, but there was something about the way he waited, patient and without judgment, that made her want to talk. "My father died when I was 15, she began, her voice low. "He was a musician, played in bars and small shows. My mother always said he died chasing impossible dreams, leaving us with nothing." She paused, the memories bringing a familiar pain. After the funeral, she burned all his CDs, all the sheet music. Said art was for bums, that I needed to be practical if I didn't want to end up like him. Jonathan leaned forward, his full attention focused on her. "But you kept dancing. Hidden. For years, hidden." Emily smiled sadly. "I learned that dreaming was dangerous, that it was better to be invisible than to risk disappointing or being disappointed." "And now?" he asked, his voice smooth as velvet. "Now I don't know anymore," she admitted, meeting his eyes. "You're making me question everything I believed about myself." The silence that followed was charged with electricity. Jonathan stood up slowly and walked to the window, his hands in his pockets. Emily could see the tension in his shoulders, as if he were fighting an internal battle. "Emily," he said finally without turning around, "there's something you need to know about me." She waited, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm not an easy man to love," he continued, his voice low and controlled. "My last relationship, she tried to blackmail me, threatened to destroy my company if I didn't marry her." He laughed bitterly. "I found out that everything had been planned from the beginning. She approached me following the instructions of a competitor." Emily felt something cold run down her spine. The vulnerability in his voice was almost palpable. "Since then, I've convinced myself that it was better to be alone. Safer." He finally turned to her, and there was an intensity in his eyes that made her tremble. "Until I saw you dancing in that room." "Jonathan," she began, but he raised his hand. "I shouldn't be telling you this. I shouldn't be feeling what I'm feeling." He approached, stopping just a few steps from her. "But when I'm with you, for the first time in years, I forget to be afraid." Jonathan's phone rang, breaking the moment. He answered, his expression changing gradually as he listened. "I understand," he said finally. "No, I'll handle it personally." When he hung up, there was a new tension in his face. "What is it?" Emily asked. "The press found out about the project, and about you." His eyes met hers, filled with a concern she had never seen. "They want to know who the mystery employee is who has won the trust of Jonathan Sterling." The main conference room at Sterling Tech buzzed with journalists, investors, and members of New York's elite. Jonathan adjusted the microphone on the podium, watching the flashes of cameras as he prepared to officially present the Arts and Community Project. Emily was at the back of the room, trying to become part of the wall, but her eyes couldn't stray from him. In the last few weeks, working so closely had become a sweet torture. The Arts and Community Project represents more than social responsibility, Jonathan began, his firm voice echoing through the room. It represents our belief that talent knows no social boundaries, and that our responsibility as a company is to build bridges, not walls. Emily felt her heart race. Every word he spoke seemed directed at her, a public declaration of everything they had discovered together in the last few weeks. She noticed some curious glances being directed her way. Clearly, some journalists had already done their homework. To demonstrate the kind of talent that this project aims to support, Jonathan continued, we have invited some community artists for a special performance. The lights dimmed partially, and a group of 5 teenage dancers from the Bronx entered the improvised space in the center of the room. Emily had worked with them for 2 weeks, helping to create a choreography that told a story of overcoming adversity through art. Her heart filled with pride as she watched them take their positions. The music started, but something was wrong. The sound was distorted, failing intermittently. The young dancers looked at each other, lost. Emily saw the panic. In their eyes, the same vulnerability she knew so well. Murmurs began to spread through the audience. Technical difficulties, someone whispered. How unprofessional. Jonathan tried to maintain his composure, signaling to the technical team, but the damage was being done. She could see the frustration growing on his face, years of perfectibility being threatened by a sound malfunction. It was then that Emily did something she never imagined she would be capable of. Without thinking about the consequences, she stood up and walked to the center of the room. Hundreds of eyes turned to her, flashes of cameras exploding like small suns. Her heart beat so hard that she was sure everyone could hear it. "Excuse me," she said, her voice surprisingly firm for someone who was trembling inside. "Dance doesn't need perfect music. It just needs a heart that beats to the right rhythm." She turned to the young dancers, seeing the recognition in their eyes. They knew her, trusted her. Emily began to clap in a soft, steady rhythm, creating her own music. Her voice rose, humming a simple melody that echoed through the silent room. "Follow me," she whispered to the dancers, and then did something that would change her life forever. Emily began to dance. Not the contained and careful dance she practiced hidden away, but the dance that came from her gut, from years of suppressed dreams, from all the passion she had kept locked away. Her movements told the story that she had never had the courage to speak. The girl who lost her musician father, who learned to hide, who found in dance her only form of voice. The young dancers joined her, following her lead, creating a spontaneous choreography that was more powerful than any rehearsed performance. The room became completely silent, except for the rhythmic sound of Emily's clapping and the soft whisper of their bare feet. When she had taken off her shoes, no one noticed. Jonathan stood motionless behind the podium, watching the woman he had seen hidden transform into something magnificent before hundreds of people. She was no longer dancing just with her body, but with her entire soul, and every person in that room could feel her truth. When the improvisation came to an end, the silence stretched for seconds that seemed eternal. Then a round of applause echoed through the room, growing into a standing ovation. Journalists scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Photographers fired endless sequences of photos. Emily remained standing in the center of the room, suddenly realizing what she had done. The blood drained from her face when she saw all the cameras pointed at her, when she realized that she had just exposed herself in the most vulnerable way possible before the most powerful people in New York. "Ma'am," a journalist stood up, recorder in hand. "Could you tell us your name?" "Emily Carter," Jonathan replied before she could speak, leaving the podium and walking to her. "Artistic coordinator of the project and one of the most talented dancers I have ever had the privilege of meeting." He stood beside her, and Emily felt the strength of his presence like an anchor. But when her eyes met his, she saw something that made her tremble. It wasn't just admiration or professional pride. It was something much deeper and more dangerous. "Mr. Sterling," another journalist shouted, "how long has Ms. Carter worked with you? Is she the inspiration behind this project?" "Art has always been the inspiration for this project," Jonathan replied diplomatically, but his voice carried an intensity that did not go unnoticed by the experienced journalists. "And Ms. Carter has demonstrated today exactly the kind of authentic talent we want to support." More questions began to be shouted, flashes firing non-stop. Emily felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Jonathan noticed her discomfort, and in a gesture that would be analyzed by the media in the coming days, gently placed his hand on her back, guiding her out of the spotlight. "The cocktail reception is being served in the adjacent hall," he announced. "Thank you all for your presence." As the crowd dispersed, still buzzing with comments about the unexpected performance, Jonathan led Emily to his private office. As soon as the door closed, she turned to him, her eyes shining with a mixture of adrenaline and panic. "What have I done?" she whispered. "Jonathan, what have I just done?" "You were magnificent," he said, approaching her. "You saved the presentation, impressed every person in that room, and showed them what I have seen since that first night." "You don't understand," she said, starting to pace back and forth. "I completely exposed myself. Tomorrow my face will be in all the newspapers. People will ask questions. They'll want to know who I am, where I come from. And that's bad because I'm not like you!" she burst out, stopping before him. "I live in a small apartment downtown. I take the subway to get here. I buy clothes at thrift stores. And now somehow I'm at the center of $1 million project, being photographed next to the most powerful CEO in New York." Jonathan took 2 steps, eliminating the distance between them. "Emily, look at me." She raised her eyes reluctantly. "Do you think I care where you come from or where you live?" His voice was low, intense. "Do you think I care what kind of clothes you wear when what's underneath them is the most beautiful soul I've ever found?" The air between them vibrated with electricity. Emily could feel the heat emanating from his body, could see the emotions passing through his eyes like storms. "Jonathan," she whispered, but couldn't finish the sentence. He raised his hand slowly, gently touching her face. "When you danced today, it wasn't just to save the presentation. You danced for me. I saw it in your eyes." It was true, and they both knew it. At that moment, in the center of the room full of strangers, she had danced for him, pouring her feelings into every movement. "This can't happen," she said, but her voice carried no conviction. "Why not?" "Because you're Jonathan Sterling, and I'm just—" He silenced her words by gently placing his thumb over her lips. "You're Emily, and that's all that matters to me." The phone on his desk began to ring insistently, breaking the moment. Jonathan ignored it for a few seconds, but the sound persisted. "Answer it," Emily whispered, taking a step back. He answered, his expression changing rapidly as he listened. "I understand. Yes, I saw the photos. No comments for now?" He hung up and turned to her, worry evident on his face. "What is it?" she asked, although she already knew she didn't want to hear the answer. "The photos from the presentation are already circulating on social media. You and me, together." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "Emily, they're speculating about our relationship. About us." Reality crashed down on her like ice water. She had exposed herself, yes, but more than that. She had exposed both of them. And now, whether they wanted it or not, they were in the spotlight, their private lives becoming public entertainment. "I need to go," she said, grabbing her purse. "Emily, wait." But she was already leaving, knowing that from that moment on, nothing would be simple anymore. They had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and the consequences were just beginning. The 3 days following the presentation were a whirlwind for Emily. Her photo was on every gossip site in New York, with headlines ranging from Sterling Tech's Cinderella to Who is the Mysterious Dancer Who Won Over the Tycoon. She had become an internet sensation overnight, and every step she took was followed by curious glances and whispers. Emily Carter, 26 years old, administrative assistant promoted to artistic coordinator. Karen read aloud in the cafeteria, her cell phone in hand and a venomous smile on her lips. Interesting how some people get promotions so quickly. Emily kept her eyes fixed on her sandwich, feeling her cheeks burn. Every conversation stopped when she passed by. Every look carried judgment. The worst thing was that deep down, a part of her wondered if they weren't right. How had a common employee come so far so fast? Jonathan, in turn, faced his own storms. In his office, David, his assistant, placed a stack of newspaper clippings and website printouts on his desk. The Van der Linde family has called 3 times today, David reported, clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Van der Linde wants to schedule an urgent lunch. Jonathan didn't even look up from the documents. Helena Van der Linde was the matriarch of the family that controlled the second largest media conglomerate in the country. More importantly, she was the mother of Isabella van der Linde, his ex-fiancée, the relationship that had ended spectacularly 2 years earlier when he discovered she was trying to sell confidential information from his company to competitors. "Cancel it," he said dryly. "Sir, with all due respect, she was quite insistent. She mentioned that it would be better to talk before certain information became public." That made Jonathan look up. "What information?" Before David could answer, the office door opened unceremoniously. Isabella van der Linde entered as if she still owned the place, her Louboutin heels clicking against the marble floor. She was exactly as Jonathan remembered, flawlessly platinum blonde, a designer dress that cost more than Emily's annual salary, and a smile that didn't reach her glacial blue eyes. "Jonathan, darling," she purred, dismissing David with a wave. "You don't seem happy to see me." "Isabella." He stood up, keeping the desk between them. "What do you want?" Straight to the point, as always. She sat down in the leather armchair uninvited, crossing her legs elegantly. "I came to talk about your new protégée. Emily is none of your business." "Oh, but she is." Isabella took her cell phone from her Hermes bag, sliding her finger across the screen. "Have you seen the speculations online? The corporate Cinderella is trending. People are wondering how a simple assistant managed not only a meteoric promotion, but also the heart of New York's most coveted bachelor." "Get to the point." "Isabella, the point, my dear, is that I hired a team of investigators." Her smile widened, revealing perfectly aligned teeth. "And we discovered some very interesting things about little Emily." Jonathan felt something cold run down his spine. "What are you talking about?" Isabella took a folder from her bag, placing it on the table with a theatrical gesture. "Did you know that her mother had problems with drugs? That they were evicted 3 times in the last 5 years? That Emily lied on her resume about her education?" "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Here are the photos." She opened the folder, revealing photographs of an older woman, visibly frail, entering a rehab clinic. Mrs. Carmen Carter admitted for cocaine overdose last year. Emily paid for the treatment with loans she's still paying off. Jonathan picked up the photos, feeling the anger grow in his chest. "How did you get this?" "Money opens many doors, darling, even in the most confidential medical files." Isabella leaned forward. "Imagine what the press would do with this information. Sterling texts Cinderella, addict's daughter, lies about her past. Her reputation would be in tatters. What do you want, Isabella?" "You back." Her voice lost all pretense, revealing a raw need. "I made mistakes, Jonathan. Mistakes that cost me the man I loved. But 2 years is enough time to learn from those mistakes. You betrayed me. You tried to destroy my company, and you destroyed me in return." She stood up abruptly, the mask of coldness falling. "You exposed me publicly, ruined my reputation. I had to rebuild myself from scratch. And now you want to get revenge through Emily?" "It's not revenge. It's justice." Isabella recomposed herself, smoothing her dress. "You have 48 hours to end whatever you have with that girl and announce our engagement. Otherwise, these photos and much more will end up in the hands of every journalist in the city." "Go to hell, Isabella." "Maybe I will. But I'm going to take your little dancer with me." She headed for the door, pausing before leaving. "Oh, and Jonathan, don't try to intimidate me or use your lawyers. I have copies of everything stored in a safe place. And my family has enough influence to ensure that this information spreads even if something happens to me. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Jonathan alone with the photographs scattered on his desk. He slumped into his chair, running his hands over his face. Isabella had found the only weapon she could use against him, Emily. Meanwhile, on the 19th floor, Emily was trying to focus on her work when her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number, containing only a link. Hesitantly, she clicked. It was a gossip site with a headline that made her blood run cold. Exclusive, intimate photos of Guilherme Montano's new flame reveal dark family past. There were no real intimate photos, but the images of her mother entering the clinic were there, along with details about their financial difficulties, about how she had lied about completing college. Everything was exposed, distorted to appear sordid and calculating. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize.
Hello.
Emily Carter. The voice was female, soft, but with an underlying coldness. Yes? My name is Isabella van der Linde. I think we need to talk. I don't understand. About Jonathan, and about how you're about to destroy both his life and your own. A pause. Can we meet this afternoon? Say at the cafe in Saks Fifth Avenue at 5 o'clock. I don't know who you are. I'm the woman who almost married Jonathan Sterling. And I'm the only person who can protect you from what's to come. The call ended, leaving Emily with trembling hands and a racing heart. She looked around the office, noticing that several people were whispering and looking in her direction. Some were holding cell phones, clearly reading the article she had just discovered. At 5 o'clock, Emily found herself sitting in an elegant cafe, wearing her best outfit, a simple white blouse and black skirt that suddenly seemed pathetic compared to the luxurious surroundings. When Isabella arrived, the difference between them became even more evident. It was as if two different species had met. "You're prettier than in the photos," Isabella said, sitting down gracefully. "I understand the appeal. What do you want?" Emily was direct, her defenses raised. "To prevent you two from destroying each other." Isabella ordered an espresso from the waiter before continuing. "Did you read the article? How did you get that information?" "That's irrelevant. What matters is what happens now." Isabella leaned forward. "Emily, you seem like a sweet girl. Naive, but sweet. So I'm going to be honest with you in a way that Jonathan probably isn't being." "What do you mean?" "Men like Jonathan Sterling don't marry girls like you. They play with you, enjoy the novelty, and then go back to the world where they belong." Her voice was gentle, almost maternal. "And when that happens, the one who gets hurt is always the girl. You don't know me." "No, but I know him. I know his world, the pressure he faces, the expectations." Isabella paused when the waiter brought her coffee. "Jonathan needs to marry someone who can be an asset to his company, someone who understands the rules of the game. You're a liability." Each word was like a stab, especially because it echoed Emily's own fears. "What are you proposing?" "That you step away, voluntarily, with dignity." Isabella took an envelope from her bag. "This check will cover your mother's debts and give you a fresh start. Anywhere you choose. Paris, London, wherever you want to study dance." Emily looked at the envelope without touching it. "And in return, you disappear from Jonathan's life today, and if I don't accept..." Isabella's smile hardened. "Then tomorrow morning, every newspaper in the country will have a very detailed article about how a young opportunist used her mother's drug problem to emotionally manipulate a powerful man and get a position she didn't deserve." "That's not true." "The truth is irrelevant, darling. What matters is the perception. And I have enough resources to ensure that the perception is exactly what I want it to be." Emily stood up, her legs trembling. "I need to think." "Of course. You have until tomorrow morning." Isabella finished her coffee calmly. "Oh, and Emily? Don't tell Jonathan about our conversation. It would be imprudent." Leaving the cafe, Emily felt like she was walking in a nightmare. Her cell phone was constantly vibrating with calls from unknown numbers, probably journalists wanting comments. The world that had opened to her 3 weeks earlier was collapsing, and she found herself exactly where she had always been, alone, vulnerable, and completely out of place. That night, in her small apartment, she looked at her mother sleeping on the sofa bed, finally clean after months of treatment, and knew that any choice she made would change their lives forever. Outside, a car with tinted windows was parked, and she knew she was being watched. The phone rang. It was Jonathan. "Emily, we need to talk." "I know," she whispered, closing the curtains. "I know." Emily didn't sleep all night. At 6 in the morning, she was already dressed and resolved. She couldn't accept Isabella's money, but she also couldn't allow Jonathan's life to be destroyed because of her. There was only one option: tell the truth and let him decide. She arrived at the Sterling Tech building before 7, using the access card that Jonathan had given her for the project. The 27th floor was empty, only the emergency lights illuminating the corridors. She headed to his office, knowing that he always arrived early. Jonathan was standing by the window, still wearing the same suit from the day before. He looked like he hadn't slept either. When he heard the door open, he turned, and Emily saw that he was holding the same photographs that Isabella had mentioned. "You're here early," he said, his voice strangely controlled. "Jonathan, I need to tell you something." "About Isabella, about yesterday," she began, but he interrupted her. "I know about the meeting at the cafe." Emily felt her blood run cold. "How did you—" "I have security, Emily. When the situation became public, I needed to protect my interests." He placed the photos on the table. "The question is, why didn't you tell me?" "I came here exactly for that. She blackmailed me, said she would destroy your reputation if I didn't stay away from you." "And what did you say?" "That I needed to think." Jonathan nodded slowly, but there was something cold in his eyes. "And did you think?" "Yes. I came here to say that I'm not going to accept her money. I'm not going to let myself be intimidated." Emily approached the table. "But I also came here to say that maybe she's right about one thing. Maybe I really am a liability to you." "Emily, no, let me finish." Her hands were trembling, but her voice was firm. "I love you, Jonathan. I fell in love with you in a way that I didn't even know was possible. But look at all this." She gestured to the photos. 3 weeks with me and your life has turned into a scandal. Your ex-fiancé is using my family as a weapon against you. That's what I brought into your life." "You brought light into my life," he said, approaching her. "For the first time in years, I felt alive. And now? How do you feel now, seeing these photos of my mother, knowing that I lied on my resume, that I'm not the person you thought I was?" Jonathan stopped a few inches from her. "You're exactly who I thought you were. A brave woman who did what she needed to do to take care of those she loves." Tears began to stream down Emily's face. "Then fight this with me. Let's face this together." He raised his hands to touch her face, but before he could, the office door opened. David entered, followed by 2 men in suits whom Emily didn't recognize. "Mr. Sterling, sorry to interrupt, but—" David stopped when he saw Emily. "Maybe it's better if we discuss this in private." "You can speak," Jonathan said, not taking his eyes off Emily. "It's the investigators you hired. They found additional information." One of the men stepped forward, handing a folder to Jonathan. "Mr. Sterling, we discovered some inconsistencies in Ms. Carter's story." Emily frowned. "What inconsistencies?" Jonathan opened the folder, his expression changing gradually. "Emily, when did you start working here?" 8 months ago. Why?" "And when was your mother first admitted?" 9 months ago." A sense of panic began to grow in Emily's chest. "Jonathan, what are you getting at?" The investigator continued. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Carter sent her resume to 23 different companies in the span of 2 months. Sterling Tech was the only one that responded, and that happened exactly 1 week after you were on the cover of Forbes magazine talking about corporate philanthropy." "What does that mean?" Emily asked, but her voice came out weaker than she intended. "It means," said the second investigator, "that someone did a very careful research about you, Mr. Sterling, before getting this job." Jonathan raised his eyes from the folder, and Emily saw something die in his gaze. "Emily, did you research about me before sending the resume?" Yes, of course. Everyone researches about companies before sending resumes. About the company or about me personally? Emily hesitated. It was true that she had read several interviews with him, had seen photos, had even watched some videos of lectures. But it hadn't been out of romantic interest. It had just been curiosity about the powerful man who ran the company where she wanted to work. Jonathan, are you insinuating that I planned all this? I'm trying to understand how a common administrative assistant managed to get my attention so completely in such a short time. The accusation hit Emily like a punch in the stomach. Do you think I used my sick mother as a strategy? That I pretended to be shy and insecure to manipulate you? I don't know what to think anymore. Then think about this, she said, her voice breaking. If I had planned everything, do you think I would have hidden so much? Do you think I wouldn't have tried to get your attention from day one? Before he could answer, David approached again. Sir, there's one more thing. Miss Carter's bank account received a deposit of $50,000 last night. The world stopped. Emily felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. That's impossible. I didn't accept any money. Jonathan took the paper that David handed him, seeing the bank statement. There it was, in black and white. A substantial deposit made at 11:47 p.m. the night before. Emily, his voice was dangerously low. You told me you weren't going to accept Isabella's money. I didn't accept it. I don't even have that amount. She took the paper from his hands, studying the statement. This has to be a mistake. Someone manipulated this, or you lied again. The coldness in his voice cut deeper than any scream. Emily looked at him, seeing the distrust grow in his eyes, seeing all the defenses she had torn down in the last few weeks rebuilding quickly. Do you really think I'm capable of this? She whispered. I didn't think Isabella was capable of betraying me either. It was as if he had slapped her. Emily understood then that no matter what she said, no matter how she tried to explain herself, Jonathan had already decided, had already built the narrative in his mind. She was just another woman who had tried to use him. I understand, she said, straightening her shoulders. You've already judged and condemned me. Emily, if you can explain what? How someone can deposit money into my account without my knowledge? How can I prove that I didn't plan to fall in love with you? She grabbed her purse. I can't, Jonathan. I can't prove feelings. I can't prove honesty to someone who has already decided that I'm guilty. So that's it? You're leaving? What did you expect? That I would beg? That I would humiliate myself trying to prove my innocence? Tears were streaming down her face, but her voice didn't waver. You said I brought light into your life, but you're so used to the darkness that you prefer to believe the lie than risk trusting the truth. She headed for the door, stopping only to turn around one last time. For your information, Jonathan, I fell in love with you when I saw you that first night, seeing you look at me as if I was something valuable. Not for your money, not for your power, but because you made me feel seen. Her voice broke. But maybe Isabella is right. Maybe men like you really can't love women like me. Not because we're not worthy, but because you're too cowardly to risk it. The door closed behind her with a definite click, leaving Jonathan alone with the investigators, David, and the echo of words that pierced his chest like knives. He looked at the bank statement in his hands, then at the photos scattered on his desk, and for the first time in years, wondered if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Outside the building, Emily stopped on the sidewalk, trying to breathe. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from Isabella. Thank you for accepting my proposal. The money has been transferred as promised. I'm sure you made the right decision. The trap had been perfect, calculated to destroy any chance of trust between them. And it had worked. Emily deleted the message and started walking, knowing that she was leaving behind not just a job or a project, but the only person who had managed to see her soul. And now, because of manipulations and distrust, they were further apart than when they were just strangers. 2 weeks had passed since Emily had left Sterling Tech, and she felt like a ghost of herself. She'd returned to her old job at a small accounting firm downtown, where the days dragged on in endless spreadsheets and reheated coffee. But something had changed in her. The woman who had danced before hundreds of people, who had faced Jonathan Sterling as an equal, couldn't completely hide anymore. It was Friday night when she was organizing her papers to leave that her phone rang. Unknown number.
Hello?
Emily Carter? The voice was male, formal. Yes? My name is David Silver, Mr. Sterling's assistant. Can we talk? It's important. Emily felt her heart race. If it's about the project, I have nothing to do with... It's not about the project. It's about Isabella van der Linde. They met at a small coffee shop on Bleecker Street, far from the business circles where David could be recognized. When he arrived, Emily noticed that he seemed nervous, constantly looking around as if he were being followed. "Thank you for coming," he said, sitting at the back table she had chosen. "I know I have no right to ask for anything after what happened. What do you want, David?" He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I've worked for Mr. Sterling for 8 years. I saw him build that company from scratch. I saw him become one of the most powerful men in the country. But I also saw how he closed himself off after Isabella's betrayal. And I saw how you changed that. In the weeks you worked together, he was different, more human." David leaned forward. "Emily, he's destroying himself. Since you left, he barely eats, barely sleeps. He fired the investigation team, canceled all social engagements. That's not my problem, isn't it? Because I have the impression that you care more than you're pretending." Emily looked away. It was true. Even hurt, even betrayed, she still loved Jonathan. She still dreamed of him every night. She still found herself looking at news about his company. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. David hesitated, then took an envelope from his jacket. "Because I found something that I think you should see." He opened the envelope, revealing photographs and documents. "After you left, I started doing my own investigations. Something about that whole situation didn't add up." Emily looked at the photos. They were images of Isabella entering and leaving buildings, meeting with men she didn't recognize. "This one here," David pointed to a bald man in a suit, "is Marcus Peterson, director of the Federal Digital Reserve. This reserve has privileged access to banking systems of various institutions. What does that have to do with me?" "Isabella met with him 3 times the week the money appeared in your account." David turned the page, showing bank statements. "And look at this, a $50,000 transfer from Isabella's personal account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. On the same day." Emily felt her heart race. "She transferred the money to a ghost account and then used her contacts to make it look like the money had gone to you." David placed another document on the table. "I have here the confirmation that your bank account was hacked digitally. The transfer never really happened. It was just a manipulation in the system to generate a false statement." Emily's hands trembled as she flipped through the documents. "Why are you showing me this? Why didn't you show it to Jonathan?" "Because I tried. He refuses to discuss anything related to you or Isabella. He said he doesn't want to hear conspiracy theories." David sighed. "He's convinced that you betrayed him and that conviction is killing him inside. So there's nothing I can do." "There is." David leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Tomorrow night is the annual event of the New York Business Association. Isabella managed to ensure that she and Jonathan are the guests of honor. She's planning to announce their engagement." Emily felt like she had been punched. "What?" "She's been pressuring him constantly, using emotional blackmail, claiming that she needs him to recover from the damage that you caused to his reputation. And he's so lost that he's considering accepting. But he doesn't love her." "No, but he's convinced that love is a dangerous illusion, that it's better to marry someone of the same social level and forget feelings." David took Emily's hands. "You need to be there. You need to confront them with this evidence. I can't just show up at an event like that. I'm not invited. I don't have suitable clothes. I'll take care of the details." David took out another envelope. "Invitation and everything. And as for the clothes, well, I think I know someone who can help. 2 hours later, Emily found herself in the studio of Maria Fernandez, a seamstress who had worked for major designers before opening her own business. David had explained the situation, and the 50-year-old woman had agreed to help. "So, you're the girl who conquered Jonathan Sterling's ice heart," Maria said, taking Emily's measurements. "I saw the photos of the presentation. You have something special, dear." "I don't know if I'm special. I just know that I can't let Isabella win." "Ah, so you're going to fight," Maria smiled. "Great, because I have exactly the dress for a warrior." She disappeared into the back of the studio, returning with a dress that made Emily catch her breath. It was navy blue, almost black, with an elegant cut that highlighted her figure without being vulgar. The fabric seemed to flow like water, with hand-embroidered details that resembled dance movements. "I made this dress for a client who never came to pick it up," Maria explained. "I think it was destined for you." That night, in her apartment, Emily looked at herself in the mirror holding the dress. For 3 weeks, she had been a different person. She had discovered courage she didn't know she possessed. She had fallen in love in a way that had completely transformed her. And now, everything depended on one last move. Her phone vibrated. A message from David. "I got more information. Isabella hired a hacker to invade not only your account, but also to plant false evidence about your research on Jonathan. I have the records. Tomorrow night, we destroy her." Emily took a deep breath, feeling a determination grow in her chest. For the first time since leaving Sterling Tech, she felt like the woman who had danced before hundreds of people, the woman who wouldn't hide anymore. The next morning, she woke up with a crystal-clear clarity about what she needed to do. It wasn't just about proving her innocence or winning back Jonathan. It was about justice, about not allowing Isabella to destroy innocent lives with her manipulations. She spent the day rehearsing what she would say, organizing the documents that David had given her, preparing for the most important performance of her life. Because that's what it would be, a performance, not of falsehood but of absolute truth, a chance to show who she really was and expose who Isabella really was. When the afternoon arrived, Emily was ready. She had enlisted some unexpected allies. Carmen, her mother, who was finally clean and ready to support her daughter, Maria Fernandez, who insisted on doing her hair and makeup, and even some of the girls from the dance studio, who had offered to help in any way necessary. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Carmen asked, holding her daughter's hands. "These rich people, they can be dangerous." "I'm sure, Mom. For the first time in my life, I'm absolutely sure of something." At 7 o'clock, David called with the latest information. "Emily, I got something big, a recording of Isabella instructing the hacker on how to plant the false evidence. She didn't know she was being recorded." His voice was tense with excitement. "It's everything we need, but you have to get there. You have to be present when we confront her." "I will be." "One last thing," David hesitated. "Jonathan doesn't know anything. He's going to be there expecting a normal business night. Seeing you is going to be a shock." "I know. I'm counting on it." Emily hung up the phone and looked at herself in the mirror one last time. The navy blue dress transformed her into someone elegant and powerful, but it was her eyes that showed the biggest change. There was no more fear there, no more insecurity. Just pure determination. The war was about to begin, and this time, Emily wasn't going to back down. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in New York was resplendent with its crystal chandeliers and tables adorned with white orchids. The city's business elite moved in small groups, the sound of elegant conversations mixing with the discreet clinking of champagne glasses. Jonathan stood near the main stage, impeccable in his tuxedo, but his eyes seemed empty. Isabella circulated through the room like a queen, wearing a red Valentino that cost more than the annual salary of many people present. She greeted every important person, always keeping Jonathan close, touching his arm possessively at every opportunity. "Darling," she whispered in his ear, "the president of the association will call us to the stage in 15 minutes for the announcement." Jonathan nodded mechanically. In the last 2 weeks, he had functioned on autopilot, making decisions that he knew were practical, rational. Marrying Isabella made sense on paper. She understood his world, his pressures, his social and professional needs. It was what everyone expected. But every night, when he closed his eyes, he saw Emily dancing. He saw the way she had transformed. In that training room, the pure passion that emanated from every movement. And he wondered if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Jonathan Sterling! He turned to see David approaching quickly, looking agitated and determined in a way that wasn't common in his always controlled assistant. "David, what are you doing here? I told you I didn't need you to attend tonight." "Sir, I need to talk to you. It's urgent." "Whatever it is, it can wait until Monday," Isabella interjected, placing herself between them. "This is a special night." "Actually, Mrs. van der Linde, it has everything to do with you." Before either of them could respond, a murmur began to spread through the room. People turned their heads towards the main entrance, conversations stopping mid-sentence. Jonathan followed the gazes and felt as if the world had stopped. Emily was standing at the entrance to the ballroom. She wore a navy blue dress that flowed around her body like dark water, the fabric capturing the light of the chandeliers and creating reflections that seemed like movement even when she was still. Her hair was loose, falling in soft waves over her shoulders, and there was something in her posture, a confidence, a determination, that made her look completely different from the shy assistant he had known. "My God," someone whispered near them. "It's her, the dancer." "What is she doing here?" Isabella hissed, her nails digging into Jonathan's arm. Emily began to walk through the room, and it was as if she was dancing even without music. Each step was graceful, purposeful. People moved aside to form a corridor, all wanting to see up close the woman who had become a legend in recent weeks. She stopped 10 feet from them, her eyes meeting Jonathan's. For a moment that seemed eternal, the rest of the ballroom disappeared. It was just them two, like that first night when he had found her dancing. "Good evening, Jonathan," she said, her voice clear and firm. "Isabella." "You shouldn't be here," Isabella replied, recovering from the initial shock. "This is a private gathering, for invited guests only." Emily smiled, taking a gold invitation from the small purse she carried. "I'm invited." "How did you—" Isabella began, but stopped when she saw David approaching with a folder in his hand. "Because I invited her," David said calmly, "and because she has something that everyone here needs to hear." "David, what is going on?" Jonathan asked, his voice low but loaded with tension. "The truth, sir, something I should have discovered 2 weeks ago, but I was too busy punishing myself to listen." Emily stepped forward. The entire ballroom was silent now, all eyes fixed on the drama unfolding before them. "Isabella," she said, her voice echoing through the silent hall, "you're very good at what you do. You almost managed to destroy 2 relationships at once." "I don't know what you're talking about," Isabella replied, but there was a note of panic in her voice. "Don't you? Then maybe this will refresh your memory." David opened the folder and removed a small recorder. "This recording was made 3 weeks ago in your office." He pressed play, and Isabella's voice filled the hall. "I need you to hack into her bank account and create a false statement showing a deposit of 50,000. Make it look like the money came from my offshore account. and plant those records of research about Jonathan in her internet history. A shocked murmur swept through the crowd. Isabella paled but tried to maintain her composure. That can be easily manipulated. Anyone can create a fake recording these days. True, Emily agreed, but what about this? She nodded to David, who handed another document to Jonathan. Real bank records showing that the money never left your account. Confirmation from the bank that my account was hacked digitally, and testimonies from 3 witnesses who saw you meeting with known hackers. Jonathan looked at the documents, his expression changing gradually. Emily, does this mean that... It means that your ex-fiancé orchestrated everything to separate us. Emily turned to face Isabella directly. She knew she couldn't buy me, so she decided to destroy me. And she almost succeeded. You can't prove anything. Isabella exploded, losing all composure. It's all conspiracy theories from a desperate opportunist. Yes, I can. Emily smiled sadly. Because you made one mistake, Isabella. You underestimated one thing. What? Love. Emily turned to Jonathan, and when she spoke, it was as if only the two of them existed in the ballroom. You told me once that I brought light into your life, but you brought something even more important into mine. You taught me that I deserve to be seen, that I deserve to be loved. Tears began to stream down Jonathan's face. Emily, and that's why I couldn't just leave and let her win. I couldn't let you marry someone who doesn't truly love you. Her voice broke slightly. Even if you never forgive me for having doubted you, I couldn't let it happen. Isabella tried one last play. Jonathan, don't listen to this farce. She's obviously lying to... Enough! Jonathan's voice echoed through the ballroom with an authority that made everyone silent. He turned to Isabella, his eyes shining with a cold anger. Enough lies, enough manipulations. Enough of you. He walked to Emily, stopping directly in front of her. You're right about one thing. I taught you that you deserve to be seen, but you taught me something much more important. What? She whispered. You taught me that it's worth taking the risk, that true love is worth more than all the security in the world. He took her hands, interlacing his fingers, and I almost threw it away because of fear. Jonathan, no, let me finish. He knelt in the middle of the ballroom before hundreds of people, pulling a small box from his tuxedo pocket. Emily Carter, you taught me to live again. You taught me that there is beauty in the world that cannot be bought or controlled. You taught me that the soul is more important than anything else. The entire ballroom held its breath. Will you marry me? Emily looked at him, tears streaming freely down her face. Jonathan, And before you say anything about not being from my world or not being suitable, he continued, a smile growing on his face, remember that you are the woman who had the courage to dance in front of hundreds of strangers to save a presentation. The woman who faced blackmail and manipulation to protect those she loves. The woman who came here tonight to fight for us. Emily laughed through her tears. When you put it that way, is that a yes? It's a yes? The ballroom erupted in applause as he placed the ring on her finger and stood up to kiss her. It was a kiss that spoke of weeks of separation, of tears and fears, but mostly of a love that had survived all the storms. When they finally separated, Isabella had disappeared, leaving only the echo of her heels running across the marble towards the exit. So, Jonathan whispered against her lips, want to dance with me? Always, she replied. And there, in the middle of the most elegant ballroom in New York, with hundreds of people watching, Emily and Jonathan danced. There was no music, but they didn't need it. They had each other's rhythm. They had the love that had transformed them from strangers into soulmates. 6 months later, they were married in a ceremony that mixed the elegance of Jonathan's world with the authentic simplicity of Emily's world. Emily's mother, clean and radiant, danced with Jonathan in the parents' waltz. David was the best man. And when it came time for the bride and groom's dance, Emily had prepared a surprise. She had created a choreography that told their story, the accidental meeting, the growing passion, the painful separation, and finally, the reunion and the victory of love. When it was over, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. "How do you do it?" Jonathan asked as they danced the traditional waltz afterwards. "Do what?" "Transform movement into poetry. Transform dance into love." Emily smiled, resting her head on his chest. "It's easy when you have the right inspiration." And so, the administrative assistant who dreamed of being seen found not only visibility, but a love that celebrated her exactly as she was. The CEO, who had closed himself off to the world, discovered that vulnerability was actually his greatest strength. Together, they proved that when love is true, there are no obstacles too great, there are no worlds too distant, and there is no social difference that can separate two souls destined to be together. Their dance would continue for the rest of their lives, a perfect choreography of partnership, passion, and true love.